When things go wrong, it's not totally out of the question for things to go horrendously wrong. There's a pretty huge difference between something being mediocre, vapid, uninspired, and just downright terrible. Bad games are referred to as such because you can't find any positives.
Or so you'd think. Sure, while a game can be considered bad for a variety of different reasons, usually to do with your own expectations of the game, the series, the genre, it doesn't mean it's impossible for it to have redeeming features. It might feel a little bit weird if you find something that isn't as atrocious as the rest of the game, but it also shows that the people involved in making it almost knew what they were doing. Or they did know what they were doing, but for such a tiny aspect that can't exactly save the game. And it's probably worth pointing out that I'm going to try and exclude as many so bad it's good parts of games. It's fun to play around with glitches sometimes, especially because they let you do things that you might not think possible within the game, but I'm not sure you can really qualify it as a good bit of a game. Glitches are almost in character with a bad game. We're looking for rare moments of genius. Less like a needle in a haystack, more like a one-hit wonder, in the space of one game. I don't know, analogies are hard.
Some games baffle me with how they go about their business, the kind where you look at them from a distance and just wonder what they were trying to do. We try and understand the thought process behind it, but it's just too difficult, you can't do it. And to think that they had the definitive action game of the last decade just a few games back.
Resident Evil 6, a game that tries to pander to long-time fans of the series with its fan-fiction-y storyline, and the best and brightest that Resident Evil has to offer in the way of characters. Just go with it, I'm sure it'll be fine. Only for its gameplay to stumble into the corridor of lifeless mediocrity encased with a shaky camera. It's not the worst game out there, but in comparison to what the Resident Evil series is capable of, because we can't take it in isolation if you're going to fill it with all these old characters, it comes up incredibly short. In fact, if it didn't have a Mercenaries mode, I'd wonder what the point of it was. The Mercenaries minigame worked well in previous Resident Evil games because it was more action-based. Any vague attempt at trying to be a horror game was dropped in favour of balls-to-the-wall arcade-style zombie shooting fun. Quite a lot of Resident Evil 6 does this already, just without the word fun. And so the game feels a little more naturally set to strip away the scary bits and just punch holes in some zombies. I wouldn't say it's better than the equivalent from Resi 4 or 5, but it is available from the start. You don't actually have to beat Resident Evil 6's campaigns in order to play it. Which is good, only like Leon's campaign anyway. I tell you wait so long for something to happen, and when it does, you start to wonder if this was what you really wanted. Poor Dookie Nukem had to wait 15 years for his series to get with the times, only to realise that it did in the wrong places and didn't in all the other places. A game where the Duke Nukem franchise had ironically stood still for 15 years, showing an end result that really does look like it was made in less than 1 year. But for the longest time there was optimism, a blind faith that everything would be okay in the end. Where did it go wrong exactly? Not too far from the beginning.
You know it's a sorry state of affairs when you spend a decade and a half fucking about with a game and lots of people's money, when you spend so long toying with the expectations of millions of fans that the whole of your game is overshadowed, in actual terms of positives rather than things like controversy, by a stupid whiteboard at the beginning of the game. Yeah.
To anyone who's played this game, how long did you spend dicking around on that whiteboard in the opening stages of it? If you're like me, then it would have been a fair old while. And I can't draw for shit. That's because this whiteboard represents a beautiful amount of hope that still exists in the player. The game is giving you this sort of freedom that you pray is continued throughout the rest of Duke Nukem Forever. For such a simple activity, it feels like more effort was put into it than in some other more important parts of the game. And besides, if you never leave the whiteboard, you never get to see just how far this game goes off the deep end. How much worse the actual game part of Duke Nukem Forever is. Better just stay here and get artistic.
Modern gaming seems a little obsessed with gameplay experiences without limits. Open worlds are suddenly much more common than they were before. We've got advances in technology and hardware to thank for that. It allows gamers to explore and discover a world at their own pace. You can basically do what you want. It's even better though when you do this by accident.
Now, I mentioned at the very beginning that I wasn't going to wax lyrical too much about games with glitches and how fun they are to break, but if the whole game is effectively one big glitch, I'm not too sure that still applies. If you don't really have to go out of your way to cause all manner of problems, then I think I can get away with it. Especially when the game in question is big rigs over the road racing. We're getting to a point in gaming where so much time is spent on physics engines, racing game or otherwise, that it's spectacularly refreshing spending a small while playing big rigs. If you've ever grown frustrated that you can't drive up a mountain in a game because the game's engine, rightly, won't let you, big rigs is what happens when you almost don't have any physics. You can get to a speed and keep it there as you travel up the steepest of inclines without a problem, while piloting a big heavy truck. Stick it in reverse and watch as the world starts going backwards with you as you reach speeds that the human mind can scarcely comprehend. Again, these probably aren't glitches, partly because it was just where the game wasn't finished properly, but mostly because there's no way in the game to do it correctly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go test out my racing truck's warp drive feature. It might seem hard to believe, but there were a few years in the history of gaming when Sonic the Hedgehog was the star of some pretty good games. Personal preference will dictate which one is your own favourite, but poor old Sonic has had a rollercoaster ride of a franchise. Reaching the deepest, darkest depths of hell that even Beelzebub would cringe at in 2006 with the hasty release of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. Though having said that, the Sonic franchise has recently shit out a game that's potentially even worse with fewer redeemable features, but we're not here for that, because Sonic 06 does have a silver lining, and it's got virtually nothing to do with the game itself. This is something that used to surprise me in gaming, but once you've used Sonic 06 as a case study for a bad game with an amazing soundtrack, the shock soon wears off. I guess it's because how detached making music is from the intricate details of the game. You could feasibly have a super low budget indie game with an outstanding set of songs playing in the background. So the poor quality of a lot of Sonic 06 is unusually garnished by music from a guy who previously worked on Phantasy Star Online. The idea is no matter how bad a game can get, there's no real excuses for the game to follow it down the gutter. The execution in Sonic 06 stands out so much because the game is every bit as bad as the soundtrack is amazing.
A lot of video game music is composed by concepts. Depending on how early in the development the process starts, it could be based off a few rough sketches or a full-blown motion cutscene. My point is that the same terrible decisions taken by the team behind Sonic 06, for example, don't tend to filter down to the team making the music. Though having said that, Sonic Boom's music is very,
One of the hardest and yet most valuable lessons you could ever learn is to first detect when you've done something wrong, and then to admit that you fucked up. You might not want to do it, but it's the fastest and indeed the most effective way of turning things around and hoping to improve for the future. If the thing you screwed up happened to be an MMO where you'd expect players to pour hundreds of hours into it, and with its reputation now potentially damaged indefinitely, drastic measures may need to be taken.
Following Final Fantasy XIV's original release and the unsavoury reviews that came soon after, a decision was made to remake the game from the ground up. A Final Fantasy XIV 2.0 if you like, a Realm Reborn or something like that. Iron out some bugs, freshen up some interfaces, and release it sometime later. Begs the question though, what do you do with the old version?
Naturally, there had to be a shutdown. If you can't offer patches due to so much being changed, the inferior version has to go to avoid any confusion. And so the countdown was on, one final mission for people playing the original 14 to enjoy before the game was shut off forever. Except it wasn't an ordinary mission, not some throwaway quest to wrap things up as simply as possible because you don't want to spend any more time on it. No, this quest had one of the moons slowly head towards the Earth with no real way of stopping it. Think Majora's Mask, except 1 in real time, 2 with real players, and 3 with absolutely no backup plan. Just sit there and watch the world and the game end. When the countdown's over, players were treated to a sign that Square Enix knew they had fucked up with the original launch. Not only is the world being brought to an end, this time by a giant dragon called Bahamut, it's being documented in one of the most spectacular cutscenes you'll ever watch. It's a bit staggering just how much effort was put into an event that signalled the end of a game. Usually when you get to that stage, you just want to sweep it under the rug and move on. The type of effort that the original release of Final Fantasy XIV dearly needed. And all of this, from a dragon levelling an entire world to the heroes trying and failing to stop it, It's all wrapped up in one of the most perfect pieces of music you could have for this moment. I'd heard about the song Answers before. I played it on Theatrhythm, I went to see Distant Worlds in London last year, but only when it's given context like this does it really show its significance. Quite simply, ending the world has never been done so beautifully.
This has been RabbidLuigi, and when I asked people on Twitter and Facebook what their favourite part of bad games were, a lot of them said switching it off and never touching it again. Not only is this what Square Enix did, but it goes to show that no matter how badly you fuck up, you can always make amends. As long as you destroy the world in the process.
Want to have a say on what I talk about next week? Leave a top 5 suggestion in the comments section below and go follow me on Twitter, where later in the week I'll be compiling the best submissions and setting up a vote over there. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Whoa, hey guys, hope you enjoyed that. Sorry I haven't been making countdowns for a little while. A combination of an exploding laptop charger and some temperamental internet meant that I couldn't get it finished, but everything seems to be okay for now. Let's hope it just stays that way. Next week we've got a top 10 coming up, which isn't actually a top 10, or really a top anything. You know, what does that mean? I don't know, maybe I'll explain it more on Twitter and Facebook. I'm sure you know where they are.